This activity is about the transport within the cell. So intracellular transport. What's the main of the three, the one that we're concerned with here? Which one works only inside the cell? Diffusion, okay? This is the reason we talked about this the other day, why cells can't get very big when we talked about multicellularity. Diffusion doesn't work over large distances, so cells have to stay small. So what we're going to be looking at today is what are kind of the effects of increasing cell size on the distance that things need to travel. Because we already know diffusion is slow and diffusion doesn't work over large distances. So what we want to look at is what happens when a cell starts to get bigger. Okay? Because there's two things we have to worry about when a cell gets bigger. Its surface area and its volume. Because the volume is the distance that diffusion has to work over. Okay? And if volume gets too big, then the cell won't function properly. Surface area is a good thing. We want lots of surface area. Okay? Because the surface area is basically the cell membrane, and the cell gets everything it needs through its cell membrane. So having lots of membrane is good, but having a large volume is bad. Okay? So what we want to have is a good surface area to volume ratio. Okay? Lots of surface area and a comparatively smaller volume. Everybody follow? Okay, and that's why we were talking about how some cells have folds in them, okay, or even like the mitochondria had those folds in it because the folds made a greater what? Greater surface area. Okay, so surface area is important. All right, so moving along here. So the big thing to remember is that cells absorb nutrients and excrete wastes through their membrane, their surface area, okay? But they must transport through their cytoplasm, which is their internal volume. Okay? As the cell size increases, the volume gets bigger faster than the surface area. Mathematically, here's why. I calculate surface area by going length times width, and then if it's a cube, like times the number of sides. Okay? Or if it's any other shape, then I have to calculate the area of every side by going length times width and then add them all together. Okay? Everybody follow me on that? Okay? To calculate volume, I go length times width times height. So if I make a cell get bigger, and let's just say the cell is a cube, because that's what we're going to be working with. If I make the cell bigger, only 2 dimensions get bigger for surface area. But how many dimensions get bigger for volume? All of them. Okay? Making a cell bigger doesn't change its number of sides. Everyone follow there? So volume increases faster than surface area because volume is 3-dimensional and surface area is 2-dimensional. Okay, so while surface area increases when a cell gets bigger, it's not helping it anymore because the internal volume is increasing so much faster. Okay, so ideally we want a surface area to volume ratio where surface area is the bigger number. Okay, like maybe 2 to 1 or 5 to 1 would be even better, maybe even 6 or 7 to 1 if we can. So like 7 times as much surface area as there is volume. Not in terms of like, because you can't really compare them, but their ratio, okay? All right, so what we're looking at here is something like this. I have this cell that's very, very large, and I have this cell that's quite a bit smaller, okay? If something diffuses in through this point right here and has to go all the way to this point here, is that a long way? Yeah. All right, in the small cell, is that distance much shorter? Okay, so diffusion works okay here, but it doesn't work so well here. Not only does this take longer, but the problem is that while here it might be really, really concentrated, it's going to spread out in all directions as it moves away from that point. Okay, which means by the time it gets here, maybe only a couple of those dots actually arrive where they're supposed to arrive. All right, it's like the shotgun approach, right? It spreads out as it goes out. Whereas in this cell, we got a whole bunch of them right here at the beginning. By the time they get across, they're not quite as badly spread out. Okay, they're spread out a little bit, but not quite as badly. All right, so internal volume is going to create some problems for us if it gets too big. Okay, so diffusion's too slow to meet or supply the needs of very large cells, and as a result, cells typically don't reach large sizes. Now, how has evolution overcome this problem? We had a whole lesson on it the other day. Nope. Instead of being one really large cell, you could be many small cells. Multicellularity is how you overcome this problem. Okay, if I'm a multicellular organism, I can be just as big as a really big single cell and work a lot better because all my cells are small and diffusion works really well in them. Okay, everybody follow? And by having a bunch of small cells, I increase my surface area because I'm looking at the outside of every single one of my cells, not just this one big cell. Okay. All right, so this is what you're going to be working on today, and I'm going to give you a bunch of it. Okay, so you'll need to fill in some of the stuff as we go along. There's no problem. You don't, or there is a problem, but you don't have to restate it because there's no design. It's not a real experiment. Okay, it's just kind of a proof of concept kind of a thing. Okay, so you don't have to do anything with the problem. It's already on yours. Okay, we need to generate a hypothesis about the relationship between surface area and volume in cells and how that can affect the functioning of the cell. Well, the functioning of the cell is this in particular. So our if part of our hypothesis should talk about cells transporting things internally by diffusion. Like if cells do that. Is that a big juicy hint? Okay, what we're doing in this lab is we're looking at imaginary organisms. Okay, we're going to represent organisms with these 3 cubes. Okay, we're going to have micro, which is a little cube or a single cell that's very small. Macro, which is a single-celled organism that's very, very big. And multi-micro, which is what kind of organism? Multicellular organism. Okay, so that's what we're comparing. We're comparing these 3 things, okay? Looking at their surface area and volume. What we should find is that what are we going to find? As a cell gets bigger, what's going to happen to its surface area to volume ratio? What happens when it's multicellular? Okay, that's what needs to go in the then part. What happens as a cell gets bigger or as a multicellular organism gets bigger? Okay, now the dimensions are not on here, but they are right here. And we're going to go and fill in this chart together. And this chart is worth 5 marks. So you'd best write down all the answers because I'm going to write them down here because we're going to do them together. And everyone's going to get 5 marks in this part of the lab. If you don't write down what I write down, I will be utterly merciless when I mark it. Okay, because I'm giving you the answers. That gives me license to be merciless when I mark. Okay, all right. If I'm looking at micro and I want to calculate its surface area, it's a cube, okay, and its dimensions are 1 centimeter. We're going to say centimeters. I know obviously a cell would not be 1 centimeter. Okay, 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. Okay, so if I want to calculate its surface area, I'm going to go length times width times, no, that's how I calculate volume, times 6 times the number of sides. Length times width gives me the area of 1 square. And there are 6 squares. So length times width times 6 gives me the surface area of a cube. Okay? 6. Okay? So 1 times 6 is 6. All right. 6 centimeters square. Okay? Remember, surface area is in square centimeters. To Superscript, you go to Format, and then, so highlight it, go to Format, and then go to, there's Superscript will be in there. Click it, and then it'll be fine after that. You may have to unsub Superscript after. Just for right now, write 2. Go back and do that later. Okay, if I want to calculate the volume of micro, length times width times height. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 1 cubic centimeter. Okay, so my surface area to volume ratio is calculated by going surface area divided by volume. What's 6 divided by 1? 6. 6, oh, come on. Six to 1. Okay. Is that a good surface area to volume ratio? Yes, it is. Surface area is much bigger than volume in the ratio. Okay, for macro. Macro is 10 by 10 by 10. So its surface area will be 10 times 10 times 6. So 10 times 10 is 100, times 6 is 600. So 600 square centimeters. If I want to calculate its volume, it's 10 times 10 times 10. All right, so the volume of this is going to be 1,000 cubic centimeters. So to calculate the ratio, I take the surface area and divide it by the volume. 600 divided by 1,000 is 0.6. All right, good or bad? Bad, yeah. The surface area is smaller than the volume, and it's considerably smaller than it was here. Okay, so this has a much lower surface area to volume ratio than a small cell does, which is exactly what we said would probably happen. All right, then I've got to do this for multi-micro. Now, here's the thing about multi-micro. It's not one cube, it's many. How many? It's multi-micro. So there's 10 by 10 by 10 little cells. So how many little cells are in here? 10 by 10 by 10. There's 1,000 micros in here. Okay, 1,000 micros in there. What was the surface area of each micro? 6. So what's the surface area of multi-micro? 6,000. Okay, I get to count the surface area of every single one, even if they're on the inside. I get to count all 6 sides of every cell. Because in a real organism, there would be fluid in between all the cells that would allow exchange. Right? So this is going to be 6,000 centimeters cubed. Or sorry, squared, not cubed. All right. What about the volume? These are the same size, right? So they have the same volume, right? That doesn't change that it's made up of many cells. It still has the same volume, so it's still 1,000. Okay, what's my ratio? 6 to 1. That should make sense, right? If I'm made up of a whole bunch of little cubes that have a ratio of 6 to 1, as a total organism, I should have a ratio of 6 to 1. Okay, does being multicellular help you in terms of your surface area to volume ratio? Absolutely. Okay, so that's kind of what we've proved now with our math. Okay, so everybody's got that chart filled in? Okay. All right, so you got some questions you got to answer here, and I'm going to kind of reword these so they make a little bit more sense. You might want to do a little rewording here. Okay, question number 1 is talking about the 2 single-celled cubes. Okay, so when the cube dimensions increase from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters, so that's from micro to macro. Okay, the increase is a factor of 10. That means each side was 10 times bigger. Right? What's the factor of increase for the surface area and for the volume? So all I do is go back to my chart and I go, okay, how many times bigger is the surface area of macro than micro? Okay, and how many times bigger is the volume of macro than micro? That's all question 1 is asking. Okay, needs 2 numbers. No, just for that one. Okay. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. All right. So for that one, all I want is those numbers maybe like in a sentence. Okay. For question number 2, now we're talking about macro and multi-micro. Okay. The size and volume of a factor of 1, which is a really crazy way of saying they're the same size. Okay. Macro and multi-micro are the same size. One really big cell versus a multicellular organism of the same size. Okay, calculate the factor for difference in surface area between these 2 cubes. So do exactly what you did in question 1, but now for macro and multi-micro. So we go back to our chart. Okay, how many times bigger is the surface area of multi-micro than macro? Okay, just write that in there. All right, and then that's it. That's all you have to do for that one. Now, for number 3. It's asking you for which two cubes will the ratio change if they get bigger. Okay, so looking back at these cubes, all right, we have to think about this. These two represent single-celled organisms. This one represents a multicellular organism. When a single-celled organism grows, its cell gets bigger. Okay, so essentially, if this cell grows, it would become this cell. If this cell gets bigger or grows, it just becomes uber macro. Really, really big, like let's say 20 by 20 instead of 10 by 10. When a multicellular organism gets bigger, what does it do? It makes more cells. Okay, the cells don't get bigger, it makes more cells. Okay, so what you need to think about is then which two of these will have their surface area to volume ratio change when they grow. All right, kind of give a little explanation for that one. All right, number 4 is asking about these shapes here. Okay, so for these shapes, you need to calculate the surface area to volume ratio for each shape. Now, for the first shape, that's easy because it's just a cube. But after that, they're not cubes. All right, so how do I calculate the surface area of a shape like this? I got to add up all the sides. Now, luckily, the top, so this side right here, and the bottom are the same. So I calculate the surface area of this side, multiply it by 2. Calculate the surface area of the front, multiply it by 2. Okay, the side, multiply it by 2. Add them together, you've got the surface area of that shape. Okay, everyone follow there? Same thing for the big long one. So what we're looking at in question number 4 is that can a cell change its shape to help with its surface area to volume ratio? Okay, because what you're going to find is when you calculate the volume of these 3 cells, they're very close. Okay, the volume of these 3 cells is almost exactly the same, but their surface areas are quite a bit different. So what we want to look at is there something a cell can do in order to help its surface area to volume ratio if it has to be really big in one dimension? Okay. All right, so what I want to see for question number 4 is your calculations and then your surface area to volume ratio for each shape. Okay, so just show me the multiplications and additions that you do, and then show me the surface area to volume ratio for each one. Okay, so you take the surface area and divide it by the volume for each one of those shapes. Okay, for number 5 is saying, okay, now here's some real cells. We're not dealing with imaginary cells like these ones anymore. Here are some cells that are analogous, that is, like these 3 shapes. Okay, a liver cell. Well, a liver cell is in your liver, obviously, which is the most supplied by blood organ there is in your entire body. Okay, more of your blood volume is in your liver than any other organ in the body. Right? So do these cells have to worry about acquiring nutrients and transporting them very much? No. Okay. Skin cells tend to be flatter because they only get supplied on a few sides, right? The outer part of my skin cells don't get supplied by blood, right? Because they're on the outside. So do they have to change their shape a little bit to adapt to that? Then you've got nerve cells as the third one. Okay. You have nerve cells in your body that run from the base of your brain to the small of your back. One cell, that long. Okay, is that pretty big? Okay, did we just say that big cells should not be able to survive? All right, so why do our nerve cells survive? Are they big in all dimensions, or are they only big in one and very small in the others? Okay, what you have to think about here is that along your spinal cord, also parallel to that are running a whole bunch of blood vessels. Okay, so if you've got a nerve cell in the middle and blood vessels running on each side, then how far do things actually have to diffuse? Do they have to diffuse from top to bottom or just from side to side? Okay, so think about that when you're kind of answering that question. Okay, can a cell adapt by changing its shape? Okay, it's kind of the same thing. Okay, then number 6, okay, we got a picture of a red blood cell. Okay, red blood cells have that indentation. They look like a donut in the middle. Okay, what's the job of red blood cells? They carry what throughout your body? Oxygen. Is their surface area going to determine how much oxygen they can carry? Yes. Okay. So what you want to look at is the shape of a red blood cell advantageous? Does it make more surface area than if it was a different shape? For example, if it was, let's say, this shape instead of the actual shape. Its actual shape is like this. Well, I got to calibrate this. Okay, that's supposed to connect. There's not a hole. Okay, so they're shaped like this. Does that have more surface area than this? Okay, and there's a disease that some people have called sickle cell anemia, where their blood cells look like that. Okay, does that affect surface area? Okay, so that's what that question is asking about. Okay, does its shape help with what it has to do? Last question is basically what we've been talking about for the last couple of days. Okay, materials have to get from one place to another by diffusion within the cell. What effect would a low surface area to volume ratio have on intracellular transport? Well, we already basically said that here at the beginning of class, right? So you need to put that in your own words, okay, to answer that question. Then copy paste your hypothesis and tell me, did we see from the cubes that size can affect volume, because volume affects how long it takes to transport materials. Okay, questions on that? All right, so really what you have to do is a hypothesis, answer these questions, and a conclusion. That's all you have to do. Okay? We did all the math, or well, not all of it, but you have to do the math for this question here. Jacob. Yes, I want you guys to work hard and get this done. I made it midnight, but I don't want to be getting them at midnight. I want to get them at the end of class. You should be able to do that. Okay? If you don't, you got to do it tonight. Okay? All right, let's get it done.